Step inside the life of Monica Lewinsky like you've never seen before. Her stunning Beverly Hills mansion is more than just a luxurious retreat. It's a symbol of resilience, healing, and triumph. Once defined by scandal, Monica has transformed her journey into one of empowerment, becoming a leading voice against bullying and a champion for change. Now her serene home, shared with her partner, radiates elegance and peace, reflecting the strength it took to rise above the past. Where she lives today will move you deeply, and yes, it just might make you cry. Where Winona Ryder lives today will break your heart. Winona Ryder lives in the same San Francisco home she quietly purchased over 2 decades ago, and it's far from a Hollywood mansion flaunting excess. Tucked into a modest, historic neighborhood, her Victorian house reflects everything she's become, deeply nostalgic, emotionally guarded, and haunted by what fame took from her. Despite still working, like her role as Joyce Byers in Stranger Things, she avoids L.A. almost entirely. Friends say she prefers bookstores to red carpets and still listens to Leonard Cohen on vinyl. There's no flashy security or entourage outside her house, just aging rose bushes, handwritten notes on her mailbox, and often no sign she's even home. After her high-profile breakdown in the early 2000s, Ryder became famously reclusive, finding solace in solitude and vintage things. Her home isn't just shelter, it's her time capsule filled with typewriters, Polaroids, and love letters she never sent. A close source revealed she still keeps a room exactly as it was in 1999, like a frozen memory of who she was before Hollywood nearly crushed her spirit. She's not hiding from the world, she's recovering from it every day. And the saddest part? She admits she's often lonely, especially since she never had children, and calls her life unfinished. Yet she refuses to leave San Francisco. For her, that house is where she felt most human. It's not just her home, it's her quiet rebellion against a world that never gave her peace when she was most vulnerable. Pamela Anderson's quiet life at 56 left everyone in tears. Pamela Anderson now lives far from the red one-piece swimsuit that defined her. At 56, she settled into a serene, off-grid existence on Vancouver Island, Canada, in the very farmhouse she inherited from her grandmother. Gone are the paparazzi and premieres. These days it's chickens, ocean mist, and hand-tinted roses. Her days revolve around gardening, animal rescue, and, surprisingly, writing poetry. After her 2023 memoir, Love, Pamela, and her raw Netflix documentary, she chose to let go of makeup, fame, and Hollywood's exhausting standards. Even her fans were stunned when she walked red carpets barefaced, defiant inner vulnerability. That decision wasn't a stunt. It was a statement. Pamela said in interviews that the glamorous image built by Baywatch and Playboy never fully belonged to her, calling it a borrowed persona. But what truly moved people to tears? The house itself. It's filled with framed letters from her sons, handwritten notes from her late mother, and quiet reminders of a woman who once captivated the world and now just wants peace. She spends evenings painting or watching birds, not chasing cameras. She's even reconnected with her roots as an activist, working with local animal shelters and climate initiatives. While tabloids long tried to define her by scandal, she's taken full control of her story. In shedding the spotlight, she found her soul again. For many, it's not just her transformation, it's her bravery to live simply and honestly that's left the world quietly heartbroken in the most beautiful way possible. What Sharon Stone did with her mansion will leave you speechless. Sharon Stone's Beverly Hills mansion was once the crown jewel of 1990s Hollywood glamour, a Mediterranean-style estate with 9 bedrooms, waterfalls, a koi pond, and ceilings painted like European cathedrals. But what she did with it recently stunned everyone. She gave it up entirely. After decades of fame, Stone sold the sprawling 10,500 square foot property and moved into a modest, art-filled home in West Hollywood, downsizing by choice, not necessity. The reason? Emotional clarity. In her own words, she no longer wanted to manage her past, but instead live in her present. She donated much of the mansion's custom-designed furniture and rare art to charity. The grand piano that once echoed through her marble-floored foyer, gifted to a community arts program. What's wild is how personal this shift was. Stone survived a near-fatal stroke in 2001, and since then, she's transformed her life piece by piece. Her new home is minimalist, with Tibetan rugs, shelves of neuroscience books, and handwritten affirmations taped to mirrors. She meditates daily, avoids parties, and spends more time sketching than socializing. But the real kicker? She turned her former mansion's sale proceeds into seed funding for her humanitarian work, especially around brain injury research and autism support. Stone didn't just sell a house, she let go of an era. What replaced it is something Hollywood rarely shows: a woman reclaiming her space, stripping away illusion, and finally choosing meaning over marble. And that's what's left even her critics speechless. The modest home Michelle Pfeiffer chose will make you cry. Michelle Pfeiffer, once the silver screen's ultimate enigma, quietly walked away from Hollywood's glitz and her $22 million Pacific Palisades estate. In its place, a downscaled, eco-conscious home nestled in Northern California's countryside, far from red carpets and designer flash. What makes it emotional isn't just the size, it's what she left behind and why. After decades of fame, Pfeiffer confessed she felt caged by opulence and longed for something rooted. The new house, built with reclaimed wood and solar panels, has no grand entrance, no staff, and no press-ready decor. It's just her, producer husband David E. Kelly, and the occasional deer outside the kitchen window. Her garden grows lavender and tomatoes, not paparazzi headlines. She does her own cooking now, mostly plant-based meals inspired by her vegan lifestyle. Inside, the walls are lined with family photos, not awards. A handwritten recipe from her late mother hangs framed in the kitchen, quietly reminding guests what truly matters. In interviews, she said this move was part of a larger spiritual shift, choosing presence over pressure. One close friend revealed she even refused a major franchise reboot offer recently, choosing home life over a multi-million-dollar paycheck. But perhaps the most touching detail? She kept the piano her kids learned on and plays it herself some nights, barefoot, with no one watching. That's the Pfeiffer most fans never see. Raw, grounded, and quietly radiant in a life she finally chose for herself. And yes, it really does make you cry. Meg Ryan's peaceful retreat at 62 is sad but beautiful. Meg Ryan, once America's undisputed rom-com sweetheart, now lives in near-total seclusion in Montecito, California, a quiet coastal town far removed from the chaos of Hollywood. At 62, she's traded red carpets for winding garden paths and blockbuster scripts for solitude. Her home, though elegantly designed, isn't ostentatious. It's filled with warm wood tones, antique finds, and vintage books curated by Ryan herself. What hits hardest is what's missing: noise. After stepping away from acting for nearly a decade, with only brief returns like her 2023 directorial comeback, What Happens Later, Ryan made a conscious decision to disappear from public life. Friends say she spends her days reading, meditating, and painting. Her son, Jack Quaid, now a rising star, visits often, but she rarely ventures out in public and only occasionally appears on Zoom panels for indie film causes. There's a gentle melancholy to it all. She still receives stacks of fan mail, some dating back decades, and she reportedly reads every letter. What's perhaps most touching is the personal regret she's quietly expressed about how fame overwhelmed her identity. "I lost track of who I was," she once admitted. Despite the quiet sadness, her retreat is healing. The ocean view from her porch has replaced the camera flashes, and the slow rhythm of her life now reflects a woman finally making peace with her choices, her past, and the world that adored her a little too loudly. It's not a fall from grace. It's a graceful landing with a soft, beautiful ache. Where Demi Moore lives now is a lonely kind of beautiful. Demi Moore now resides in a breathtaking yet soulfully quiet estate in Idaho's Sun Valley, miles away from Hollywood's glimmer and even further from the chaos that once consumed her. After decades of dominating headlines, from Ghost to her whirlwind marriage with Ashton Kutcher, she chose something few celebrities dare: isolation with intention. Her lakeside property, built from reclaimed wood and stone, blends into the natural terrain like it's hiding. And maybe it is. Moore spends her days hiking alone, meditating in silence, and caring for her dogs, all rescued. She's often barefoot in her garden, far removed from designer heels and premieres. Despite her occasional public appearance, like supporting her daughter Rumour's acting milestones, she's said to spend long stretches in solitude. Her home is filled with old photographs, crystals, and handwritten notes she's kept from her daughters. Her bathroom still has a deep soaking tub with candles, a quiet homage to that famous Vanity Fair maternity shoot. But what truly stirs the heart is her own admission. I'm still learning how to love myself, even here. She journals daily, attends remote spiritual retreats, and reportedly turned down several lucrative offers to stay rooted in simplicity. The Hollywood machine may have forgotten her for a while, but she's not bitter, just bruised and wiser. There's no entourage here, no staged Instagram glow. Just wind through the trees, a fireplace flickering inside, and a woman still healing under the surface. Lonely? Perhaps, but it's the kind of beautiful that comes with finally exhaling. The house Jennifer Grey calls home will hit you right in the feels. Jennifer Grey, forever etched in pop culture as Baby from Dirty Dancing, now lives in a modest but soulfully rich home tucked in the hills of Malibu, far from flashy Hollywood mansions or curated influencer estates. What makes her house hit you in the feels isn't the size or price. It's the emotion carved into every corner. After a turbulent journey that included a near-career-ending car accident in 1987, spinal surgeries, divorce, and a very public struggle with identity post-rhinoplasty, Grey deliberately chose a space that reflected healing, not performance. Her living room features family photos instead of awards, and her kitchen? It's full of handwritten recipes from her father, the late Broadway legend Joel Grey. She often bakes while listening to jazz or reads old journals near a window overlooking the Pacific. The house is filled with vintage furniture, books on movement and healing, and yes, a worn dance floor where she sometimes practices alone, not for fame, but for joy. Since her 2022 memoir, Out of the Corner, Grey's focus has shifted inward. She teaches movement workshops in her community and prefers gardening over premieres. She keeps her late father's bowler hat framed on a shelf, a quiet reminder of legacy and loss. Visitors say the space radiates warmth and vulnerability, much like her. It's not about reclaiming the spotlight. It's about finding her own light on her own terms. And for fans who grew up with her, that quiet triumph hits deeper than any Hollywood comeback ever could. What Molly Ringwald's home says about her life today. Molly Ringwald, the red-haired icon of the Breakfast Club and 16 Candles, now resides in a brownstone in Brooklyn that feels more like a quietly curated memoir than a celebrity home. Married to novelist Panio Giannopoulos and raising 3 kids, she's far from the neon glow of 80s fame. Her home is filled with vintage charm, velvet reading chairs, antique lamps, and shelves crammed with first-edition books in multiple languages. A fluent French speaker and accomplished author herself, Ringwald's space reflects the intellectual and emotional depth she's spent decades building. One room is dedicated solely to vinyl records, Billie Holiday, Leonard Cohen, Nina Simone, artists she's long admired and covered in her own jazz-singing career. There's a subtle melancholy to the space. Framed family photos sit beside old Brat Pack memorabilia, a reminder of a past she respects but no longer lives in. She's spoken openly about the contradictions of fame, once saying her characters were so visible yet misunderstood, and her home mirrors that nuance. Her writing desk is covered in drafts, sticky notes, and baby pictures, creative chaos grounded in motherhood. While she still acts occasionally, like her roles in Riverdale and indie films, she spends more time now hosting quiet dinners, writing essays, and reflecting. No paparazzi, no velvet ropes, just hardwood floors, poetry books, and the gentle hum of a woman who once defined teenage rebellion, now settled, soft-spoken, and quietly powerful. Her home doesn't shout, It whispers everything you need to know about her today. Alyssa Milano lives here now, and it's surprisingly emotional. Alyssa Milano now lives on a 5-acre ranch in Bell Canyon, California, a home that's less celebrity palace and more sanctuary for a woman who's lived multiple lifetimes in the public eye. After early fame on Who's the Boss and later cult status with Charmed, Milano stepped away from the Hollywood hustle, turning her attention toward activism, healing, and raising her children. The house itself is warm and lived in, with handmade quilts, a vegetable garden, and chickens that her kids named after Bridgerton characters. But the most emotional part? A meditation room Milano built after surviving personal trauma, including postpartum anxiety and a painful COVID-19 battle. That room contains letters from fans, photos of her late uncle, and even press clippings from her most misunderstood years, intentionally displayed as part of her journey towards self-acceptance. She's been candid in recent interviews about how her home became a container for healing, especially after decades of online harassment and political backlash. Her office includes shelves of feminist literature, scripts she's rewriting to include more women in power, and her late grandmother's rosary beads. Milano still acts occasionally, but her passion now lies in activism and writing, hosting her Sorry Not Sorry podcast from the same room where her children nap. She's no longer chasing fame, she's shaping her legacy, and somehow, in this quiet, earthy space filled with love, protest posters, and rescued pets, Alyssa Milano has never felt more grounded or more movingly human. No one expected Lisa Bonet to end up in this house at 56. Lisa Bonet, the once elusive queen of alternative cool, now lives in a surprisingly humble Adobe-style home deep in California's Topanga Canyon, a mystical bohemian hideaway that feels worlds away from her Cosby Show stardom or red carpet days with ex-husband Jason Momoa. At 56, Bonet has leaned fully into nature, privacy, and inner stillness. Her house isn't massive or tech-forward. It's built from earthen materials, with curved walls, handmade clay tiles, and wide-open spaces filled with incense, crystals, and antique books on indigenous philosophy. After her split from Momoa was finalized, she retreated here permanently, declining all press requests and public appearances except for rare art or spiritual events. Friends say she lives almost off-grid, grows her own herbs, and spends long mornings in meditation or writing poetry. The most surprising part? She built a soundproof music room underground, where her daughter Zoe Kravitz sometimes visits to jam in total anonymity. There's no staff, no security gates, just wind chimes, prayer flags, and the echo of someone who's seen the highs and lows of fame and chosen none of it. Bonet has spoken about living between worlds, never fully belonging in the spotlight nor outside it, and this house reflects that duality. It's neither mansion nor cabin. It's a sacred pause, and for a woman who once mesmerized America with a single raised eyebrow, this peaceful, intentional home is the ultimate plot twist, quiet, defiant, and heartbreakingly beautiful in all the ways no one predicted. The truth about Helen Hunt's home life will move you to tears. Helen Hunt, the Oscar-winning star of As Good as It Gets and one of the most quietly respected actresses of her generation, now leads a deeply private and emotionally rich life in a sun-washed bungalow tucked behind hedges in Brentwood, Los Angeles. Unlike the opulence many peers chose, Hunt's home is modest, filled with lived-in furniture, overflowing bookshelves, and old family photos that span generations. After enduring profound loss, including the sudden death of her father, director Gordon Hunt, and a serious car accident in 2019, she recentered her life around motherhood, healing, and simplicity. Her daughter, McKenna Lee, remains her greatest priority, and the house reflects that. Handwritten notes on the fridge, a piano they still play together, and walls that echo with laughter more than legacy. She rarely hosts industry parties, but often welcomes neighbors for quiet dinners filled with deep conversations and home-cooked meals. Her kitchen isn't designed for show. It's for comfort. And what's most moving is her studio in the back, where she writes scripts she's not sure she'll ever release, some about grief, others about resilience. Friends say she often lights a candle before sitting down to write, a habit picked up from her father. Hunt's home life isn't glamorous, but it's breathtaking in its honesty. It's not just a place to rest. It's a sanctuary for a woman who's seen fame's cost and chosen to live with intention, vulnerability, and grace. And yes, that quiet bravery will absolutely move you to tears. You'll cry when you see where Jamie Lee Curtis lives today. Jamie Lee Curtis now lives in a charming ivy-colored house in the heart of Los Angeles' Pacific Palisades, far from the sterile mansions of fame, and somehow filled with more soul than square footage. This isn't a celebrity compound guarded by steel gates. It's a home that feels lived in, loved, and a little haunted by memory. The daughter of Hollywood royalty, Tony Curtis and Janet Leigh, Jamie spent years struggling to feel like she belonged in her own legacy. Her current home tells that story with heartbreaking beauty. Inside, you'll find photos of her late parents, her children, and even the original Halloween script framed on a wall near the staircase. She's spoken openly about her past battles with addiction, and the quiet sobriety of her space reflects that healing. Soft lighting, rescued furniture, and shelves lined with recovery books and handwritten affirmations. The backyard isn't a set piece. It's a garden she built herself, where she often writes longhand or tends to her beloved rescue dogs. Her kitchen has an open pantry style, no hiding behind perfect cabinets, because, as she once said, what's the point of pretending? After winning her first Oscar for Everything Everywhere All at Once, she didn't upgrade homes, she stayed. Because this house, with its imperfect charm and emotional honesty, is her story. And for fans who followed her evolution from Scream Queen to Truth Teller, seeing her live this way, not bigger but deeper, truly brings tears to the eyes. Inside Lea Thompson's house, it tells a story you didn't expect. Lea Thompson, best remembered as Lorraine Baines from Back to the Future, now lives in a warm, nostalgia-soaked craftsman-style home in Los Angeles that quietly defies every expectation of 1980s fame. You might expect memorabilia or Hollywood flash, but what you find instead is a lived-in, deeply personal space filled with layered stories, and not just hers. The entryway features framed sketches drawn by her daughter, Zoe Deutsch, as a child, not movie posters. The piano in the corner isn't just decorative, it's the same one she practiced on before landing her first ballet scholarship. Though Thompson transitioned from actress to director in recent years, what truly makes her home surprising is how much of it is devoted to other people's dreams. One room is a mini film editing suite where she helps mentor young female filmmakers. Another holds dozens of vintage cameras collected by her husband, director Howard Deutsch, some of which were used on sets of iconic John Hughes films. She's even preserved the kitchen table from the family's first apartment, a symbol of their early struggling years. Lea still receives Back to the Future fan mail, and she keeps some of the most touching ones pinned near her desk, including a letter from a woman who said the film helped her heal from childhood trauma. Thompson's home doesn't scream celebrity. It whispers legacy, artistry, and heart. It's not just where she lives. It's where generations of stories quietly live on, far beyond the screen. What Tori Spelling lives in now will shock 90210 fans. Tori Spelling, once known for playing Donna Martin on Beverly Hills 90210 and growing up in the staggering luxury of Aaron Spelling's 123-room mansion, now lives in a rented RV. Yes, an actual mobile home parked at a Ventura County campground, something that stunned longtime fans and tabloid readers alike. After a series of financial setbacks, including legal battles, credit card debt, and a very public separation from husband Dean McDermott, Spelling made the dramatic downsize not as a stunt, but out of necessity. The RV itself isn't glitzy, is compact, functional, and shared with several of her 5 children. Gone are the days of the sprawling closets and private chefs. Now it's bunk beds, campfire meals, and Wi-Fi boosters. What's both shocking and strangely endearing is how open she's been about it. On social media, she's shown her kids helping with chores and decorating the small space with thrift store finds and personal artwork. Even her dog has a corner. Critics have scoffed, but fans see something raw and real. A woman raised in surreal privilege, now navigating life with resilience and no filter. Despite her fame, she's been transparent about not receiving a large inheritance from her father's estate. She's now focused on podcasting, budget beauty hacks, and rebuilding from the ground up, literally. For those who remember the glammed-up team in Chanel, it's jarring. But for those watching closely, what she's living in now isn't just shocking. It's a gritty, heartbreaking chapter of survival in plain view. Nia Long's house reflects a bittersweet reality. Nia Long, known for her iconic roles in Boys in the Hood, Love Jones, and The Best Man franchise, now lives in a sophisticated yet emotionally layered home in the Hollywood Hills, a space that quietly mirrors her life's latest chapter. After her high-profile breakup with NBA executive Ime Udoka following a public cheating scandal in 2022, Long retreated into this home not as a luxury hideaway, but a healing cocoon. The house, mid-century in design with floor-to-ceiling windows and muted tones, blends elegance with solitude. There's no entourage, no extravagance, just quiet rooms filled with books, candles, and fresh-cut flowers her son helps pick out. She keeps a meditation corner overlooking the canyon, where she journals and reflects. Her walls feature black art from rising female creators, and her kitchen doubles as a therapy zone, where she bakes while listening to old-school soul music. What stings the heart is that in interviews, Long admits this house became her safe space after betrayal. Yet she's also said it gave her clarity. She's focused on producing and directing now, not just starring, and this home has become her creative headquarters. Friends say she writes at dawn with jazz in the background, sometimes barefoot in silk robes. Her son, Keys, has his own studio space for music production. It's a house built not for image, but for emotional survival and rebirth. In its understated beauty and quiet corners, you see a woman wounded, but rebuilding with both strength and grace. Inside the home that almost broke Brooke Shields. Brooke Shields, who once seemed invincible as the fresh-faced icon of Blue Lagoon and Calvin Klein fame, now resides in a stunning but emotionally complicated townhouse in Manhattan's Upper West Side, a place that nearly broke her, and not in the metaphorical sense. After purchasing the brownstone in the early 2000s, she poured her heart, savings, and years of life into renovating it, only to face legal battles, contractor betrayals, and financial stress that pushed her to the edge. Shields documented some of the ordeal in interviews, describing how the dream of a perfect family home turned into a never-ending money pit. At one point, her marriage to writer Chris Henchy was strained over the cost and delays. But beyond the structural chaos was the emotional weight. She was still navigating postpartum depression, and the pressure to maintain perfection off-screen while rebuilding literal walls around her was crushing. The irony? The house is now breathtaking. Historic molding, French chandeliers, and rooms filled with books, children's art, and theater posters from her Broadway run in Cabaret. There's even a hidden staircase that her daughters used as a secret reading nook. Brooke has said that the home eventually grew into her, reflecting her own resilience. Today, she hosts small literary salons and charity events there, but it's not about glamour, it's about legacy. The very walls that once echoed with frustration now hold a family that endured, and knowing what it took to create this life, that's the part that really breaks you. The house Marisa Tomei keeps hidden is full of painful memories. Marisa Tomei, the fiercely private Oscar-winning best known for My Cousin Vinny and, more recently, Aunt May in the Spider-Man films, owns a quiet, almost secretive brownstone in Brooklyn that she rarely speaks about publicly, and for good reason. The house, inherited after the death of a close family member, holds layers of emotional history that still weigh heavy on her. While she's lived in several high-profile places over the years, including lofts in Manhattan and temporary homes in L.A., This particular home has remained untouched by the industry circus. Tucked away behind ivy and iron gates, it's where she spent long nights caring for her ailing father during his final years, a time she's described in interviews as both bonding and deeply traumatic. The living room still holds his old armchair, untouched, and she's reportedly refused to let movers change anything about the original layout. Visitors say the house has almost a museum-like stillness, where time feels paused. Marisa often retreats here to write, grieve, and recharge far from public life. Despite being offered substantial money to film inside for lifestyle features, she's declined every time. The walls are lined with books on Italian-American history, framed family recipes, and scripts with handwritten notes from her early career. There's no glam, no performance, just raw memory. For a woman so magnetic on screen, this hidden home reveals something else, a life shaped not only by triumph, but by quiet, enduring heartbreak most of us never knew was there. Goldie Hawn's private sanctuary will leave you in tears. Goldie Hawn, long adored for her bubbly charm in classics like Overboard and Private Benjamin, now finds peace in a deeply personal sanctuary tucked away in the mountains of Aspen, Colorado. But this isn't just a celebrity hideaway. It's an emotional refuge layered with decades of reflection, love, and loss. Far from the spotlight, her sanctuary is a wooden lodge-style retreat she shares with longtime partner Kurt Russell, complete with creaking floorboards, handwritten affirmations pinned to mirrors, and a meditation room she designed for herself. What makes the place so moving is what's not seen on glossy magazine covers, the sorrow woven into its walls. Hawn has spoken openly about the grief of losing close friends, the stress of raising children in Hollywood, and the heavy silence of watching her fame shift with age. In Aspen, she turned to Buddhist practice, daily journaling, and nature walks in complete solitude. Her sanctuary includes a cozy cabin studio filled with journals, Polaroids from the 70s, and even a letter her mother wrote before passing. She calls it her heart room. Friends say she lights a candle each morning before sunrise and doesn't touch her phone for hours. Despite her glamorous legacy, she cooks simple meals, often barefoot, with soft jazz playing in the background. The home has no designer labels, just soul. For someone who spent a lifetime making the world laugh, her sanctuary is where she finally let herself cry. And knowing that, it hits deeper than any performance she ever gave. What Drew Barrymore did with her childhood home is gut-wrenching. Drew Barrymore, whose roller coaster life has played out since age 7, made a quiet, heartbreaking decision few fans saw coming. She sold her childhood home in Sherman Oaks, California, not for profit, but for peace. The property, a modest mid-century house once buzzing with chaotic energy from the Barrymore legacy and early stardom, had become a trigger rather than a treasure. It was there she lived during the most turbulent years of her youth, before she entered rehab at 13 and became legally emancipated at 14. In interviews, Drew has said the home held both magic and mayhem, recalling nights alone in the living room while the adults partied elsewhere. After years of therapy and building her adult life, motherhood, acting, hosting, and running her lifestyle brand, she returned briefly, hoping to renovate the space into something livable. But standing in the doorway, she broke down. Instead of renovating, she let it go, donating much of the original furniture to women's shelters and writing a private letter to the new owners, asking only one thing: please fill it with laughter. Today she lives in New York with her daughters, far from the ghosts of that house. But she keeps a framed photo of the old place in her office, not to dwell, but to remember just how far she's come. For someone whose early years were a tabloid tragedy, what she did with her childhood home wasn't just a real estate move. It was an emotional exorcism that left a lump in every fan's throat. Where Courteney Cox lives now feels lonely yet poetic. Courteney Cox, forever Monica Geller to Friends fans, but far more layered in real life, now resides in a serene oceanfront home in Malibu that feels less like a Hollywood retreat and more like a living poem. Designed in collaboration with architect Michael Kovac, The house is sleek and minimalist, with large windows opening to the Pacific, but the emotional weight lies inside. After her daughter Coco moved out for college and her longtime relationship with Johnny McDade turned long distance again, the silence in the house deepened. Cox has spoken candidly about the emotional void that comes with an empty nest, and you can feel it in the space. Her grand piano sits untouched more days than not. She keeps a journal on the kitchen island filled with handwritten letters never sent. A candle always burns in the same corner of her studio, where she records songs, edits home videos, and sometimes just listens to old voicemails. The house is scattered with subtle tributes to her past, a friend's script framed behind a door, Polaroids of her younger self with Lisa Kudrow and Jennifer Aniston, and artwork Coco made in kindergarten. Despite the quiet, there's a beauty in how she embraced this chapter. She grows her own herbs, hosts small dinners for close friends, and walks the beach alone at dusk. For someone who once lived in front of a laugh track, her current life is hushed, reflective, and heartbreakingly poetic. And that contrast, glamorous past, solitary present, is what hits hardest. You'll cry when you see what Bridget Fonda's life looks like today. Bridget Fonda, once the rising star of the 90s with roles in Single White Female, Jackie Brown, and Point of No Return, has completely vanished from the spotlight, and not by accident. Today she lives a startlingly quiet life in Encino, California, far removed from the glamour of her Hollywood lineage. A member of the Fonda acting dynasty, she walked away from it all in 2003 after a serious car accident, followed by the birth of her son with composer Danny Elfman. Since then, she's been seen only rarely, often in comfortable clothes, makeup-free, running errands like any other neighborhood mom. The choice wasn't due to scandal, it was personal and deliberate. She's never returned to acting, turned down interviews, and avoids red carpets entirely. Their home, once filled with A-list guests, is now a music-filled retreat where Elfman composes and Fonda gardens in peace. Friends say she spends her time reading, baking, and volunteering under aliases. What's striking isn't the absence of fame, it's the fullness of her quiet life. She reportedly declined offers for reboots or memoirs, insisting she has nothing left to prove. The same woman who once captivated audiences with her on-screen edge now prefers watching old movies with her son rather than reliving her own. For fans, seeing her step back so completely is both jarring and deeply emotional. Bridget Fonda didn't fade, she walked away with grace. And witnessing the purity of that decision, it'll break your heart in the gentlest way. Cameron Diaz lives here now, and it's not what you think. Cameron Diaz, once the queen of blockbuster hits like There's Something About Mary, The Mask, and Charlie's Angels, now lives in a quiet, unassuming home in Montecito, California, a far cry from the Hollywood high life she once ruled. After stepping away from acting in 2014, Diaz traded red carpets for garden gloves, choosing a slower, more intentional existence. Her Spanish-style home isn't massive or ultra-modern. It's warm, earthy, and deeply personal. Think hand-woven rugs, shelves of wellness books, and a kitchen she designed herself for her second act, clean living and motherhood. Since welcoming her daughter Radix in 2019 with husband Benji Madden, Diaz has focused on family and her organic wine brand, Aveline. But what catches people off guard is how normal her life is now. She grows her own herbs, shops at the local farmer's market, and hosts quiet dinner parties, often cooking from scratch. Her home features zero Hollywood memorabilia, but plenty of toddler art and love-worn furniture. Friends say she rarely talks about her old films unless asked, and has no plans to return to acting unless the project feeds her soul. Instead, she meditates in the sunroom, records wellness podcasts from her guest house, and keeps a vintage Vanity Fair cover in a drawer, not on display. It's not what fans imagined for the blonde bombshell who once lit up every screen, but that's what makes it so powerful. Cameron didn't fall. She landed, softly, right where she was meant to be. Why Elizabeth Perkins chose this solitary life at 65. Elizabeth Perkins, best known for her razor-sharp wit in Weeds and unforgettable roles in Big and The Flintstones, has quietly stepped into a life of intentional solitude on a forested property in Vancouver Island. At 65, she's traded backlot sound stages for birdsong and handwritten poetry. After decades in front of the camera, including her Emmy-nominated run as Celia Hodes, Perkins made a conscious decision to unplug from the Hollywood current. She now lives in a timber-frame cottage surrounded by mossy pines and ocean mist, where neighbors are scarce and cell signals weaker than a Weeds punchline. The decision wasn't dramatic, just deliberate. Following the loss of her mother and several autoimmune health scares, she craved stillness. Her husband, cinematographer Julio Macat, often travels for work, leaving Perkins with the quiet she now craves. Her days revolve around writing, painting, and long walks with her dogs, plus a typewriter she swears helps her hear her own thoughts. Inside, her home holds relics of a past she honors but doesn't cling to. A framed big script with Tom Hanks doodles, original Weeds wardrobe pieces tucked in a cedar chest, and a small shrine to her late mentor, director Barry Levinson. She grows lavender, bakes rustic bread, and journals by firelight. No team, no entourage, just a woman choosing silence over spectacle. And for an actress who once made millions laugh by being loud, her quiet, solitary life now speaks louder than ever, and honestly, it hits somewhere deep. Mary-Louise Parker's hidden home is a heartbreaking escape. Mary-Louise Parker, celebrated for her Emmy-winning turn in Angels in America and her unforgettable role as Nancy Botwin in Weeds, now lives in a secluded farmhouse in the Hudson Valley, and it's not the rustic dream you'd expect, but a deeply personal space from years of private pain. Far from L.A. or Broadway, the house is tucked behind dense maple trees with no signage and barely a digital footprint. Inside, the decor feels like a time capsule of her inner life. Stacks of handwritten letters, she still prefers analog, shelves lined with poetry collections, and a clawfoot tub she reportedly retreats to daily, sometimes with a notebook, sometimes with nothing but silence. The home became her refuge after the deaths of her father and mentor Philip Seymour Hoffman, two losses that hit her harder than most fans realized. Her kitchen, modest but warm, is decorated with her children's doodles, not awards. She often bakes bread at 3 a.m. when insomnia and reflection take over. There's no house staff. Parker tends to the garden herself, grows herbs she dries for tea, and even mends old clothes by hand. Her favorite room? A sun-soaked library with a window seat where she writes long, unsent letters to people she's lost. She calls them emotional postcards. Despite Hollywood offers, she rarely leaves unless a project is truly meaningful. For a woman who once thrived in chaos on screen, this hidden, hauntingly quiet home is her way of breathing again. And yes, it'll absolutely break your heart. Where Andie MacDowell ended up living will catch you off guard. Andie MacDowell, known for her timeless grace in 4 Weddings and a Funeral, Groundhog Day, and decades of L'Oreal campaigns, now lives not in Hollywood, but in a small sun-dappled college deep in the mountains of North Carolina. It's the kind of place you'd expect a novelist to hide out, not a global beauty icon. But MacDowell, born in Gaffney, South Carolina, has always been more grounded than glam. After years of bouncing between shoots and red carpets, she returned to her southern roots full-time, settling into a home surrounded by wildflowers, chickens, and fog-covered hills. Her choice wasn't random. It was restorative. She's spoken openly about her mental health, aging in Hollywood, and her decision to embrace her natural gray curls, which became a quiet revolution during the pandemic. The house reflects that same unfiltered honesty. No marble counters, no stylists on standby. Instead, there are stacks of books on spirituality, clay mugs from local potters, and a front porch swing where she watches the mist roll in at dawn. Her adult children visit often, and she still acts, but only in roles that speak to her soul. In between, she writes poetry and tends to her herb garden. It's not the lifestyle anyone expected for a former model who graced the Cannes red carpet barefoot, but that's the point. Andie MacDowell didn't retire. She rewrote what elegance looks like. And where she lives now, it's proof that authenticity, not opulence, is the real legacy. The house that haunts Jennifer Beals to this day. Jennifer Beals, forever etched in pop culture as the electrifying Alex Owens from Flashdance, lives today with a memory she's never quite been able to shake, and it's tied to a house that, while long sold, still follows her. In the late 1990s, Beals owned a stunning Spanish-style home in Laurel Canyon, a Hollywood Hills enclave known for its rock and roll ghosts and creative energy. But what should have been a peaceful refuge became a quiet source of dread. The actress has since shared that the house held an unexplainable weight, an emotional residue she couldn't name. Doors creaked when no one was home. Lights flickered. Her dog refused to enter certain rooms. At first, she chalked it up to old wiring and paranoia, but it deepened. She began waking at 3:33 a.m. consistently, a phenomenon that led her to start researching spiritual hauntings. Ironically, it was during this time that she starred in darker roles, including The L Word, exploring themes of identity, secrecy, and psychological tension. Eventually, she sold the property quietly and moved to a more modern, light-filled home in the Pacific Northwest, where she now lives with her family and paints in solitude. But she's admitted she still dreams about that Laurel Canyon house. Always the same hallway, always the same sound of distant footsteps. Whether psychological or paranormal, the house marked her. And for someone as grounded and intellectual as Beals, the fact that she still won't discuss its full story, that's what haunts us. Daryl Hannah's eco-home has a sad story behind it. Daryl Hannah, the star of Splash, Blade Runner, and Kill Bill, has long been an environmental warrior, but few know the heartbreak tucked inside her famed solar-powered Colorado ranch. Perched on rugged land near the Rockies, her off-grid home, built using reclaimed wood, recycled steel, and even straw bale insulation, is more than a green dream. It's a response to pain. Hannah, who has lived with autism spectrum disorder since childhood, created the property as a sanctuary from the overwhelming noise of Hollywood and modern life. But the sad truth? She originally built it with hopes of raising a family there. Years before marrying musician Neil Young in a quiet 2018 ceremony, Hannah had shared in interviews her deep longing for children, a dream that quietly faded as she aged, focused on activism, and navigated personal health battles. The house was designed with space for a nursery and a treehouse that's never been used. Though she's found love and purpose, she once described the home as quiet, almost too quiet, particularly after her father passed away. His old guitar still hangs in her living room. Today, she spends mornings meditating by the solar-heated pond, tending to her organic garden, and handwriting letters instead of using email. The sadness isn't overwhelming, but it lingers in the silence between the wind chimes and the beehives. For someone who helped redefine mermaids and assassins, this earth-hugging home is where Daryl Hannah let go of what never came and embraced the bittersweet life that did. You won't believe what Rebecca de Mornay calls home now. Rebecca de Mornay, the steely siren of risky business and the chilling force in The Hand That Rocks the Cradle, now calls an aging craftsman bungalow in Echo Park her sanctuary, and it's a far cry from the high-gloss life many imagined for her. Tucked into a quiet hillside just outside of downtown Los Angeles, the home isn't extravagant, but it's layered with history, intention, and more emotion than any luxury penthouse could offer. The walls are lined with old books, vinyl records, and vintage film stills, not of herself, but of actresses she admires, like Gena Rowlands and Liv Ullmann. After fading from the Hollywood spotlight in the early 2000s, de Mornay turned inward. She's known to split her time between writing screenplays, caring for her grown daughters, and working on music. Yes, music. A grand piano sits in her living room, a nod to her early training in classical performance, and visitors say she still plays Chopin when the mood hits. The kitchen, filled with hand-labeled spice jars and recipes passed down from her German mother. But the most unexpected element? She's converted her garage into a meditation and grief support space where she hosts small private gatherings for women navigating life after loss. It's raw, honest, and completely outside the world of red carpets and press junkets. Rebecca de Mornay didn't vanish, she evolved, and what she calls home today isn't glamorous, it's grounded, soulful, and a reflection of a woman who's lived many lives and quietly found her peace. Where Christy McNichol found peace will stir your soul. Christy McNichol, the Emmy-winning star of Family and Little Darlings, now lives a life so removed from Hollywood that most fans barely recognize her, by design. After retiring from acting in the late 90s due to mental health struggles, McNichol settled in a quiet one-story home in Los Angeles' San Fernando Valley. It's not flashy, not gated, and not meant to impress. Just a peaceful sanctuary she's built with her longtime partner, Marty Allen. The home's walls are lined with books on psychology and healing, not movie memorabilia. A modest piano sits in the corner, which she still plays from time to time, and there's a sunlit meditation room filled with crystals, journals, and soft music. She's no recluse, just selective. McNichol has turned down nearly every reboot and reunion offer, choosing instead to devote her time to mentoring at-risk youth and volunteering for animal rescue programs. Her backyard is a rescue haven itself, with several adopted dogs, cats, and even an old tortoise named Wally. The most touching part? She teaches mindfulness and emotional regulation classes at a local center, quietly helping others navigate the kinds of storms she once faced under glaring spotlights. Fans who meet her now often say she feels like someone who's finally exhaled, and it shows. Christy McNichol didn't just walk away from fame, she walked toward something softer, deeper, and more enduring. The simplicity of her current life isn't just calming, it's the soul-stirring proof that real peace doesn't need an audience. The emotional truth behind Ally Sheedy's living situation. Ally Sheedy, the unforgettable outsider from The Breakfast Club and the poetic soul of St. Elmo's Fire, now lives in a quiet duplex in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and it's a world away from the glitz of 1980s Brat Pack fame. What led her here isn't failure, it's choice, and a deeply emotional one. After decades in the industry, Sheedy walked away from mainstream acting to focus on writing, teaching, and finding emotional grounding. She now teaches drama at a local college and mentors young LGBTQ+ students, many of whom have no idea she once shared the screen with Judd Nelson and Molly Ringwald. Her modest home is filled with mismatched furniture, books on feminism and queer history, and art created by her now adult son, Beckett, a prominent transgender activist. A single poster of High Art, her indie breakout role, hangs quietly in the hallway, signed not by co-stars, but by students she's taught. In interviews, Sheedy has opened up about past struggles with addiction, burnout, and industry pressure. Her current space reflects healing, not retreat. She tends to a small balcony garden, cooks simple vegetarian meals, and hosts intimate book clubs where fame is never the topic. And though she rarely returns to Los Angeles, she's at peace with that chapter being closed. Ally Sheedy didn't just step out of the spotlight, she stepped into something gentler, wiser, and rooted in real connection. Her living situation isn't just humble, it's a quietly triumphant act of reclaiming her narrative, one tender, unfiltered day at a time. Where Erika Eleniak lives at 56 will leave you silent. Erika Eleniak, the original Baywatch beauty who once graced magazine covers and lit up the big screen in Under Siege, now lives in a quiet, modest home on the outskirts of Calgary, Alberta, and it's nothing like the California beach life that made her famous. After struggling with body image issues, disordered eating, and the relentless pressure of 1990s fame, Eleniak made a radical decision: leave Los Angeles entirely. What began as a temporary escape turned into a full relocation to Canada, where she embraced a slower, more introspective life. Her home, surrounded by pine trees and snow-capped views, is calm and deeply personal. There's a wood-burning fireplace, shelves filled with self-help and spiritual books, and no trace of Hollywood glam, just warmth. She's spoken openly about her past traumas and her ongoing mental health journey, often describing this space as her healing ground. She now works part-time as a wellness coach and occasionally teaches acting workshops, but she's no longer chasing the spotlight. Instead, she finds joy in cooking with her daughter, journaling by candlelight, and walking trails where no one asks for autographs. A single framed photo from her Baywatch days sits tucked in a hallway, not as a trophy, but as a reminder of who she used to be. Fans who discover where Erika lives now are often stunned, not by the simplicity, but by the sheer courage it took to step away. It's quiet, it's raw, and it's the most powerful chapter she's ever written. Why Jennifer Jason Leigh lives so far from Hollywood now. Jennifer Jason Leigh, the fiercely versatile actress behind Fast Times at Ridgemont High, Dolores Claiborne, and The Hateful Eight, now lives far from the bright lights of Hollywood by choice, not circumstance. She settled into a low-profile home in Ojai, California, a quiet artsy town nestled between the Topatapa Mountains and rows of citrus groves. The move wasn't sudden. After decades in the industry and a deeply private divorce from director Noah Baumbach, Leigh gradually stepped back from public life, opting instead for something slower, quieter, and deeply introspective. Her home is filled with worn books, vintage movie stills, none of herself, and decades' worth of handwritten journals. Leigh has said that acting was always more about exploring truth than chasing celebrity, and in Ojai, she lives that philosophy. She gardens, she paints, and she walks a rescue dog through trails where no one asks for selfies. Her kitchen is deliberately analog. No smart appliances, just cast-iron pans and an espresso pod from the 90s. She still reads scripts, but often turns them down, preferring roles that challenge her emotionally rather than professionally. One room in her house is a tiny screening space where she watches rare 1970s films, her favorite era. When asked why she left Los Angeles, she once replied simply, "I was done pretending to need the noise." In a career built on complexity and rawness, Jennifer Jason Leigh's current life is her boldest role yet, a woman quietly, unapologetically free. Where Monica Lewinsky lives at 49 will make you cry. Monica Lewinsky lives quietly in San Francisco, far from the political firestorm that once defined her name. After years in New York and London, she chose Northern California for its privacy and grounded pace. Her home isn't a flashy celebrity property or a guarded compound. It's a calm, understated residence in a city known for reinvention. She has spoken openly about valuing safety and community, and San Francisco offers both without the glare of Washington or Los Angeles. Inside, friends have described a warm, thoughtfully designed space filled with books, meaningful art, and mementos from her advocacy work. Since rebuilding her life as an anti-bullying activist, producer, and public speaker, including her widely viewed TED Talk and her role as a producer on Impeachment, American Crime Story, she's built a home that reflects resilience rather than spectacle. There's no red carpet outside her door, no constant media presence, just quiet streets and a woman who reclaimed her narrative. At 49, her house represents stability after chaos, a place chosen not for status, but for peace. What Debra Winger's home says about her journey. Debra Winger, the fiercely independent star of Terms of Endearment, An Officer and a Gentleman, and Shadowlands, has never done fame the conventional way, and her home in rural New York reflects that beautifully. Tucked away in the Hudson Valley, her house is a rustic, unpolished farmhouse where creaky wood floors and second-hand furniture tell more stories than any red carpet could. Winger, who famously took a break from Hollywood at the height of her career in the 1990s, designed the space with purpose, not to impress, but to live in. There are stacks of philosophy books, handwritten letters on the kitchen counter, and a wall of framed stills from films she didn't star in, a nod to her enduring love for cinema as an art, not an ego trip. Her husband, actor-director Arliss Howard, built a writing studio in the barn, where the couple works quietly on passion projects that rarely make the trades. There's no glam squad, no staff, Just goats, a vegetable patch, and morning coffee by the fireplace. Winger has said in interviews that she was always more interested in life than lifestyle, and her home embodies that ethos. She mentors young artists, reads poetry aloud at local cafes, and, in true Winger fashion, refuses to own a television. For a woman once dubbed difficult by an industry that couldn't box her in, this home is her soft, stubborn rebellion, and it doesn't just speak volumes, it whispers her entire journey, one quiet, defiant room at a time. No one believed this is where Geena Davis chose to live. Geena Davis, the towering talent behind Thelma and Louise, Beetlejuice, and A League of Their Own, now lives in a place so understated that it shocks even her biggest fans, a converted farmhouse outside of Danbury, Connecticut. After decades in the spotlight and a hard-won battle for gender equality in film, Davis didn't retreat to Malibu or Manhattan. She retreated to purpose. Her home sits on several wooded acres and doubles as the headquarters of the Geena Davis Institute on Gender in Media, the research organization she founded in 2004. The house itself is cozy, not flashy. There's an open kitchen where she cooks her own meals, stacks of academic reports on gender bias scattered across rustic tables, and a wraparound porch where she takes calls barefoot with a mug of herbal tea. Her rewards aren't displayed in a glass case. They're tucked in a cabinet near dog treats and birdseed. Friends say she writes most of her speeches from a loft office with a window that overlooks the garden she built from scratch during lockdown. Thanks for watching Past Paradise, where Hollywood legends come home. If you enjoyed today's look into the topic, where Monica Lewinsky lives at 49 will make you cry, then don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Got a star or story you want next? Drop it in the comments. Until then, keep the nostalgia alive only on Past Paradise.